Blood quantum is defined as the total percentage of your blood that is tribal native due to bloodline. All tribes use blood quantum as a requirement for enrollment of membership. Usually, this is detailed on a Certificate of Degree of Indian Blood card issued by the United States government.
The United States government used blood quantum to determine which individuals were federally recognized as Indians under each tribe's enrollment to be eligible for financial benefits and aid under the treaties that were made or payments for sales of land.
In the United States, the first tribe to establish blood quantum was after the first law passed in Virginia in 1705. It was created to deny civil rights to any Native American who was full or half-blooded. Other efforts, such as the Dawes Act of 1887, were made by the government to encourage Native American tribes to establish criteria for tribal membership, although it was not widely applied by tribes. However, the passing of the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934 took a different direction. The act was to reverse the traditional goal of assimilation of Indians into society and to strengthen tribes and perpetuate tribes' historical culture. The government established that Native American individuals could only be enrolled to one tribe. This caused many conflicts because Native Americans had a different point of view on how they identified. Prior to colonization, Indians did not measure their identity but by blood. They associated themselves according to clan, village, and/or territory. In connection to the looking glass theory, blood quantum has forced Native people to reshape their self-concept based on the understanding of how the government perceives them, or the criteria they force Natives to follow in order to identify as Indian.
For instance, if a Native identifies as 50% Yurok and 50% Hoopa, this individual would see themselves as 100% full blood. However, the federal government would only allow the individual to enroll onto one tribe's roll, not multiples. This would mean, depending on the blood quantum degree, that individual would only be recognized as being 50% Native.
The blood quantum actually affected the tribes by reducing the amount of tribal members that were eligible to people become tribal members based on the fact that they were breeding out of the blood quantum to get enrolled as tribal members in the tribes. And I know I'm from Hoopa, and what we did was actually lowered the blood quantum to try to keep the membership up, to allow more members to be enrolled and become tribal members. And I think other tribes are doing the same thing. And there are some tribes that are actually going to descendants of allottees that were originally allotted land on the reservation. And just as long as you could prove that you're a descendant of an original allottee, then you still get to go by that standard rather than using a blood quantum standard. So I think it would be important for all tribes to look at that issue, because the blood quantum itself is going to eventually run out. There isn't going to be any Indians. You just run out of blood. The effect of the blood quantum in future generations is, right now I'm a Hoopa, and the way the Hoopa roll works is you have to be an enrolled Hoopa member for that blood for your children to count. So if there's, like, we do have people in our tribe that have Hoopa blood in them, but they're not enrolled Hoopa members, so that blood isn't used to count the degree of blood for their children. So it only counts if you're an enrolled member, and eventually the people are going to run out of blood. So it's going to affect the membership in the future by not being enough blood to become an enrolled tribal member. And I think tribes need to really seriously think about this issue and how we're going to keep our membership up, how we're going to continue on into the future, because basically, I think the original intent of the government was to use blood quantum to disenroll everybody by just eventually the blood is going to fade out. There will be no members. So, and it's working.
Well, I believe it's ignorance. They didn't know about Indians, and it was many reasons, and it's hard to define because everybody has their own opinion, who's an Indian and who's not an Indian, and sometimes it's because of the community. When I was growing up, we all knew who the Indians were. And now, because of the money's coming in on the tribes, everybody wants to be an Indian. But when I first worked in the education for NICE, who was Northern Indian California Education, I had to go out and hunt for Indians, and I couldn't find any because nobody wanted to be an Indian. And when we established this rancheria in the 1960s, we tried to get them to move on, but nobody wanted to be a reservation Indian. Matter of fact, they called us nasty names because we were Indian on the reservation. So now it's different. Everybody wants to. The shame is taken out of being an Indian. At one time, it was very. I went through the whole thing. When you're the shame of being an Indian, and the anger and the what is it? Well, anyway, went through every stage. Now I'm a nice little old Indian woman.
Imagine being banned from your own culture. Blood quantum has led to intercultural discrimination, which was a learned behavior from the boarding school experience. Those who were forced to attend boarding schools without choice and later returned home had a difficulty fitting back into their culture and being accepted back as a native person. Yet later on in the 20th century, when attending boarding school was a choice, some of those that went and came back were disapproved of and treated differently in their family and community. This influenced the intercultural discrimination and still carries on to this day, where many Native Americans discriminate on one another's quote-unquote Indianness based on skin, hair color, participation in ceremonies, and language.
Well, when my sisters came back from boarding school, they went to Sherman Institute. I had two sisters, and they weren't treated any different when they got home, but we live in a small community, and it's mostly a white community. And my one sister, that's very fair, had white friends, and they were kind of snooty, and therefore she'd be snooty around us. And my other sister was dark, but she wasn't treated any different either because she fit in, and regardless of how she was, she had many friends in both communities, white and Indian. But living in a small town, we had there was a lot of pretty snooty white people, and there's still a lot of them. And but anyway, I think it was a good and bad experience being in boarding school. I didn't have to go. I cried, so I didn't have to go. But I think it was good because all the leadership in California came from those boarding schools in California, and they're the ones that had made things happen in the state of California. The ones that went to boarding schools rather than white schools. And so my sister wasn't really active, but my other sister was, and she did more cultural work.